All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We are covering a topic in regards to when is the right time to buy your home. We've got some do's and don'ts that we want to talk about first, and then get into a little bit about what's transpired last year and this year, and give you evidence of what the metrics are that we look at to help you identify when is a good time, when is the best time to buy a home. So I think we've got a lot of just great valuable information for you to take away with you today. But I'll go ahead and bring in our co-host, Chase Hodgson. How you doing today, Chase?
Doing good, Jerod. Doing good. Happy to be here, man.
Yeah, it's a great day. I think our listeners should get a lot out of this episode. I'm excited.
Yeah, yeah. It's spring. Things are warming up everywhere.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, let's do a couple of housekeeping items real quick here. For those of you that I haven't met yet, my name is Jerod Lee. I'm the associate broker and team lead here at My Home Connection, also known as MHC Realty. We do have a sponsor for today, and it's a collaborative effort with Chase at Summit to provide you up to $500 on your appraisal and up to $500 on your home inspection to help minimize your cost and build your confidence in the home buying process, along with the other things that we've developed over time, almost the last couple of decades here with home search, obviously, property community reports, no obligation consultation to talk about your specific needs, a weekly podcast series to answer a lot of the questions that you might have. And then we just love to share secrets with you to bring you kind of inside the world of real estate to get you best informed. So with that, let's chat a little bit about kind of how we structured or at least developed the outline for this topic today, and that is, in 2024, we were forecasting what might happen towards the end of the year and this year because we saw, the political landscape with the election and, interest rates and things like that. And then we kind of foreshadowed what, let me see here. My video is doing a little weird stuff there. Um, and we kind of anticipated what was going to happen in 2025 or theorized what it was, and now we're seeing evidence of that. So we want to share with our listeners what that evidence is and the sense of urgency that we would suggest that you have so that you don't kind of get caught off guard if you haven't already started the process. So that's kind of the impetus, I guess, for
Yeah,
today's conversation. Just want to be timely, but we're also going to talk about the things that you have to think out as a whole anytime you're buying a home. So this topic will be applicable anytime you purchase, but at least with evidence of a very specific recent activity, I guess.
yeah, yeah.
Is the
Hey,
plan.
yeah, yeah. Man, I don't want it to be like and I told you so episode, but we told you so. Like that's kind of what we're at and where we're seeing, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's I think it's going to be helpful to show evidence of why we talk about the things that we talk about and how it translates. And I don't think that our listeners, if they get on it now, have missed the boat entirely. But it's pretty safe to say, based upon what we're seeing, if they don't get on it soon, I think there could be some regret there. Um, anyway, again, I don't, we're not pushy. We're not wanting you to rush into anything that doesn't make sense for you. But on the other hand, we
Right.
don't want that sense of, wow, I missed the boat, because we have had an adjustment in the last year and a half, correction in our market with pricing. We didn't
Yes.
have a market fall apart like people were kind of thinking and hoping. We didn't have interest rates, fall through the floor like they were hoping. So all the reasons you were pausing didn't materialize as a lot of people thought that they could. And now we're only seeing evidence in the other direction that things are just going to strengthen up. So we want to cover all that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And that's the key, right? For like our approach, and it's not just run out and buy a home, right? Like it still has to be financially, feasible for you and your family and your situation and and your goals. So that's the
First and
important part.
foremost.
Uh huh.
Yep.
And I think But I do think if that's something you've been thinking about or talking about or wanting to do, the conversation needs to be had now, definitely sooner than later, because there should be a little bit of urgency in what we're seeing. Um, I I think I think I did a video or recently maybe on my business page that's basically, there's a cost to waiting, right? There's always a cost to waiting. It's basic economic philosophy or term, opportunity cost, right?
Mhm.
So if you don't do something, what is the offsetting, right? Every action has a reaction, right? So what's the financial reaction to your decision? And the video I did recently, so fourth quarter year over year, so this fourth quarter compared to the last, we were up about 6.5% here in Idaho, specifically the Treasure Valley area for home prices. And then you go into January, and this January was up 7.8% over last January, right? So that's
Yeah.
a significant increase, and there's a couple of different things that come to play there is that now homes are more expensive, right? And if but what is it, with rates up, everybody thinks, oh, I need to wait till rates come down. Well, what is that, right? What is that monthly cost, right?
Right.
So um, if you look at it and factor in the appreciation from those numbers I just gave, going from 6.5% to down close to 6%, you're going to be probably $50 or $60 more by waiting for the rate to come down after the appreciation has taken effect.
Yeah.
So lower interest rate does not necessarily mean lower payment.
Yeah, we've talked about in a number of episodes that the rate can eventually be, I don't know, adjusted, corrected when rates change, but price won't. And if we're highly confident values are going to go up and your price goes up, did you potentially shoot yourself in the foot by waiting for rates to go down when your home price went up? And that's not something that'll be corrected later. So, yeah, I think it's important to note that no action in real estate is an action.
Yeah,
It's a
and there's a
decision to,
cost
yeah.
to that. There's definitely a cost to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about a couple of the do's and don'ts here before we proceed into the timelines, because I think those are important to note. And we talk about this all the time. The first thing you've got to do is get pre-qualified. You got to know, it's kind of like going to a car dealership. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to go shopping for cars that you like until you know you can afford it, just to be disheartened when it might be out of your budget, right? Because if it's me, I'm picking out the most expensive car and then trying to figure out how I can, get into it.
Yeah, yeah, and the funny thing is that and what I want to point out is it's not as daunting as people think, right? So if you've never bought a home, you've never been through the process, I often run into folks that are just scared to
Yeah,
start, right?
yeah,
Oh, I'm not ready. I'm not. Well, it's if you don't know the guidelines and you don't know what it takes to get qualified, you don't know that you're not ready,
yeah.
right? So talk with a professional and let them help you, like let them give you the actual numbers, and then you can decide if you're ready or not.
Well, we've talked about this in past episodes at great length. That a lot of people, the conceptions that they have, the myths, the misconceptions. The one that stands out the most is a lot of people toss around, I got to have 20% to buy a
Right.
home. Well, no, you don't
Mhm.
have to. Preferable, you do, but you
Great
don't,
if
right? We've
you
talked
right.
about getting folks in for as little as 0.5%, depending
Yep.
on their personal situation. So to know where you stand, and by the way, the sooner you know where you stand, the sooner you can make improvements and corrections and what you can do to better strengthen your buying position. Because the longer you wait, then you're trying to play catch up. It could be getting worse or it could not be improving. And then you kind of miss the opportunity in the market because you weren't as prepared as you could be.
Right. Yeah, we create plans all the time, right, with folks,
Hmm.
and they like sometimes it's like, oh man, no, you are ready right now. And other times it's like, well, if we do this and this and this, then we can get our scores to here. We can get these things paid off, so it helps our financial position as well. And so it just, yeah, we can create that. We can help you create that instead of just trying to guess, because it's the funny thing about credit is, and we've talked about this before, like you could pay it off, you could pay certain accounts off or get rid of them, and that could actually hurt you and make your score worse, right? So it's a complicated uh, it's a complicated process as far as the credit thing. So you definitely want to talk to somebody who does that on a regular basis.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of reasons why that could go wrong, right? You think, oh, my credit is so bad, years out, when in reality, things that can be done that collapses that down into just a couple of months, right? Or
Yes.
you can make assumptions on what you think is correct, as you mentioned earlier. Hey, if I pay off this debt and close the account, it's going to help me. When in reality, that was giving you, history, and you didn't necessarily need to pay it off. You might have even wanted to keep some in there under 30% so that they see it, being used properly. Anyway, that again we've talked about on prior episodes, but to get the line item here of getting pre-qualified first with a professional that knows what everybody's looking for in order to give you a loan and the different loan products, so you're not chasing something that you're just speculating on.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Move now. That's the first step. It doesn't cost you anything either
Right.
to do that, right? That's another misconception I run into. It doesn't
Yeah.
cost you anything but a little bit of time to find out exactly where you're at. It's way simpler than you think.
Yeah, well, let's talk about what I think personally, and I think you're inclined to agree with me here. One of the main reasons I think people are disinclined to reach out is because they think, oh, now that I've talked to somebody, I'm going to get pushed into something, rushed into something, and we certainly don't operate like that. We've got folks that need to be ready because their lease is up in a month, to people that are a couple of years out for whatever reason, and that any of that is okay with us. I always tell my clients, my pace is your pace. I,
Yes.
I'm not in a hurry. I want a lifeline client, and I'd really be honored by your referrals. And rushing somebody into something doesn't accomplish that. It isn't the right thing to do, and it doesn't accomplish that.
No, nobody wins when that's the case, and you do see that happen in the industry. But there are great realtors out there. There are great mortgage loan officers out there um, that actually just want to educate you, want to help guide you, want to help get you into the game when you're ready, right?
Yeah.
But having all the information helps you make that decision, right? So the educational piece is huge.
Yeah, and you just touched on my next point here is, and I'm going to add, servant-hearted, servant-minded here, I put these in this order for a reason, right? Servant-hearted, minded, experienced local professionals, um, because you want that person that's there to serve you in your process of buying your home, not
Hmm.
in their process of selling a home.
Right,
If that made sense. Like, this is for you, the buyer. This isn't
right.
for the real estate agent or the lender or the inspector. We're here to help you do what you need to do, want to do, in the
Hmm.
timelines that makes best sense for you. So, got to have your heart and mind in the right place.
Yes.
Um, and then experience, right? I mean, we just got to admit, the more experienced you are, the more you've seen, both the good, the bad, and the ugly, the more you can pull from. I'm not saying there aren't good, lesser experienced agents, but the experience helps you pull from, you know,
Yeah.
from prior situations.
Yeah, a lot of different scenarios can come up in the process, and somebody that's just done it longer has more than likely run across those and knows the solutions, right?
Yeah, there you go. Solutions that you can come up with to create a better home buying situation. And then I put the local professional because it needs to be a micro view of the market, not a macro view, right? You get a lot of people watching the national mainstream media, and they're hearing what's going on in the real estate market, but what they need to factor in is that the Boise market isn't the same as the Shreveport, Louisiana market.
Yeah,
I mean, yes, there's probably some general view of what real estate's doing, but not taking into account what each local area is doing could be a big miss.
yeah, and we run into the same thing in lending. And I the education piece, like it's different for agents, right? Because there are so many little, micro neighborhoods and inside of neighborhoods, right? Like knowing the areas and being able to, in lending, each state has different programs, right? Especially when you're talking about first time home buyers. Now, I am licensed in, I don't know, 16 or 17 states. But I can educate myself in those programs and become fluent in those, whereas it's a little more difficult for the agents, right? Because do they live there? Do they fly there? Do they see the community? Do they, right? So much of that goes into your job, as opposed to where mine is just being able to, educate, like do the education and read, as opposed to being, actually feeling what is going on in that different area.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. So anyway, those are some. There's a bunch of other do's, but once you're here, we'll guide you through the rest. So, those two are probably the most important.
Just get started, right?
Yeah.
Just get started.
Yeah. Nobody's ever made a bad mistake by just asking the questions, getting started, knowing what your options are, what your options aren't,
Yeah,
and getting good professional advice of how to best proceed or not proceed right now. That's okay.
right. Do you remember your first purchase?
My first home purchase? Oh yeah, very vividly.
Do you remember the thought process and why? Like, what spurred you to want to buy?
Yeah, I mean, it was all the traditional things. Had a family that we wanted, to have wealth generation, to have, foundation, no pun intended.
Yeah,
Uh, consistency, in our lives, and ultimately the American dream, right?
yeah. How,
Because
how old were you when you bought your first one?
oh, let's see, I bought in '97, so holy mackerel, long time ago. What,
Yeah,
20 plus, yeah, years ago,
yeah,
almost 30.
yeah. So I think the reasoning for me was a little bit different. I just wanted independence, right? In my
Oh,
20s, wanted independence. Didn't think I could buy. Actually, had a friend who was an agent way back then,
hmm,
and a friend who was a lender. I wasn't in the industry at the time, and yeah, they helped me get into my first place, and it was awesome. Like, it was a great experience.
yeah,
Uh, it started my whole real estate journey, right? So
yeah,
it's interesting. Like, so we've all been through it. Like, the majority of us, right? You want to work with people who have been through the process. They know what it feels like and everything. But it's so personal, and everybody's motivations are typically a little bit different,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But that basic foundation piece is still there, is what it can do for you.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I like the idea of independence, right? And just kind of getting really started on adulting, I think is what the
Yes.
kids say these days, evidence of real adulting. Anyway, well, let's talk about just a couple of don'ts here, real quick. And before we even get to the second one, just know I'm kind of chuckling when I put that on there, but we'll talk about it in a second. Um,
Mhm.
but we've already kind of talked about the don'ts, right? Don't listen to the news when it's not applicable to where you're at necessarily.
Mhm.
It might be, but it might not be. Um, and then the not getting advice from friends and the family. Um, I'm not saying don't get any advice, but know where it's coming from, right?
Mhm.
They're generally coming from a place of concern for you and care for you, um, but almost always it's maybe outdated, because they haven't bought in 5, 10, 15 years, uh, you know, or it's
Yeah.
self-serving, you know,
Right.
friends want you to do this or don't want you to do that. And it tugs, instead of talking to the professionals that know where you're at and have your best interest at heart and know what the market's doing and bringing it all together. Um, and it becomes a little bit of a whirlwind when everybody else is chiming in, right? Oh, I'm buying a house, and everybody wants to give you advice.
Right. Yeah. It's man, the national news piece, like I feel like, we all want to know what's going on in the economy. We all want to know what's happening before we make big decisions like this. But unfortunately, that, like, and I'm not getting political here, trying not to, but it doesn't matter which side you're on that aisle. Um, all the news we get nationally is negative, right? Like like it's so hard to get real information from there. So you can do your own research and you can see where the economy's going, but at the same time, you want to do historical research. What really happens to real estate during a recession?
Yeah.
What really, whatever the economic environment is, right? That's typically what people put on hold. Oh, the recession's coming. I'm going to pause, and because rates go down in a recession and housing prices are going to plummet, and I'm going to buy something for cheap,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of that has to, and we've talked about it before. A lot of that has to do with 2008 because that's the freshest in people's mind. But that's like one of two times since the 40s where rates have actually gone down during a recession,
Yeah.
right? So the education piece is big. Do the right education, right? Find the right information.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And this one's going to be a sticky wiki here, because you talk about the news, and everybody kind of sits in a different position. But I think most people can agree exactly to your point. Generally, the news, they want you to view the news. They want you to stay engaged with the news by design. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, most of us pay a lot of close attention to kind of negative news.
Hmm.
So their bent is a little bit on, I got to draw you in,
Yeah.
to keep you there. So that's kind of a natural tendency. And again, it's not specific to where you're at, and it's bent in the kind of negative Nelly direction. Neither of
Right.
which are super super helpful. I don't know where I'm coming up with some of these terms, man. I'm just saying stuff that I'm sticky wiki. Where'd that come from? Anyway,
Yeah, no, it's just know where the information's coming from. Know, you know what I mean? Like it's so easy to find like real data yourself now.
yeah,
Um, but but you get into that stuff, and then you get worried about timing the bottom. Like if we are in a dip in the economy, like nobody ever times the bottom exactly. Like you buy, like the thing about real estate is it always appreciates. There may be, like I said, in history, there's been a couple times where it's actually gone down, but then it goes right back up, right? So
yeah,
it's always going to appreciate. Think of it as a long-term investment, and go into it with that mindset, and you'll be just fine.
yeah, yeah. And I would say, I mean, it says don't do these things, but obviously that's easier said than done. All I
Right.
would say is if you do, please take that information back to your professional, your lender, your real estate agent, and say, hey, what about this? I'm hearing this. And then factor in whatever the response is. And they might be in total agreement with it. They might, yeah, that's a thing. And this is a consideration. Or they might say, hey, that was nice of, your Uncle Bob to give you that advice, but we haven't had that issue in our industry since the 0809 meltdown. They closed those loopholes. They closed,
And
you know,
right, and you can get good advice, most of the time it comes from a caring place from friends and family. But like, to give an example, when I bought my first home, um, my dad was telling me I'm not ready, and he was everything to me, right? Like he was my hero, he was my business mentor, like my best friend, like he was it for me. And when I bought that first house, he was telling me, you're not ready, you're not mature enough, you're not this, you're not that. Um, but I was hell bent,
yeah,
on getting that independence, and not having to have roommates and things like that, and be able to, drive my own future. And a couple things come into play, like your own personality comes into play. And I've said this before. Um, I believe that most people, when backed into a corner, they will fight their way out, right?
yep,
So if you get yourself a debt, I had a sales manager, like, anytime he hired a new rep, he was like, always pushing them to go buy a new vehicle, because if they did that, you know what I mean, they'd go out and sell to be able to pay for it. But in 4 or 5 years, I made $75,000 on that first
in
house
equity.
in equity. Yeah,
Yeah. Figure out how to keep that home, didn't you?
yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. Like, and my dad knew me better than anybody, but it wasn't necessarily the right decision for me to not buy, right? So it all worked out really well for me.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good, example of kind of what we're talking about. Your friends and family, generally, most of them are going to be overly concerned about you.
Mhm.
Um, you as a lender, and you can speak more to this, but they're not going to let you buy a home these days unless you're qualified.
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
it's not 2008, right? Like, and
right.
that's prior to that, there was so little regulation in lending that state your income. Everybody was buying second and third properties because they were saying they made $1 million and they made like 100,000, right? So a lot of that went on back then, and that's not the case now. Everything's verified. You have to have some skin in the game. And you have to have good credit. You have to have the history. So it's not like it was. Doesn't mean bad things can't happen, right? But that's our job to try and help advise you on based on your information what the best scenario is for you to move forward and what it's going to take to keep it. Like,
Yeah.
it's not just a we're not just a hey, we sold the house, see you, if you ever decide to buy again. No, like, we can stay engaged and and help you grow and take the next steps even after the first home spot.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, let's talk about the win. Wow, we covered a lot of preceding information when we get to here, but we have talked about some of this stuff already, so that's good. It's personal thing, right? We've kind of beat that drum. Uh,
Yeah.
so until as per your specific situation, you don't really know, right? you're
Right.
just you're just guessing, and everybody's personal situation is different. So let us kind of assess where you're at, give you some options, and talk about when, if or when it makes sense.
Right.
The other is it's seasonal. So, I talked about specific markets. We've had a good, strong market here. I just went past 20 years of being a licensed agent. So I'm talking about generalities here. We've had some years where it's just been super strong, and seasons don't seem to matter. They just seem to come and go, and it
Right.
stays as strong as it was earlier in the year. But generally speaking, we can look at these good buying opportunities in the winter, right? New construction homes with some seller concessions or some promos to help you with your closing costs, or getting a lawn put in or appliances or whatever.
Right.
Um, so if you're a person that does need some financial help getting all those funds together, there's a good time of the year to do that. If you come to
Yes.
us in a couple of months from now, those promos might be gone, or the market's moving fast enough where sellers just they're not interested in helping with that. Right now, we're still getting it, but I think that's short lived. And I'm going to give you evidence of that. You and I talked briefly about where we get this one of its part of it's been theory up till now, but now we're seeing evidence of what we were talking about coming to fruition, right? We're seeing
Right.
transaction coordinators that work with a lot of different agents. They're having a lot of new
Hmm.
contracts coming in. We talked to our inspectors. One of my inspectors says his January and February's best years ever.
Right.
So he's screaming right along. I think yourself, you said you've got a lot more activity than you would
Yeah.
have
We
guessed.
yeah, we track everything, or I track everything by leads, right? Because basically not all of them turn into deals, right? Because some people just aren't ready. But I know my percentages, and my leads are about double from what they were 1st of January, right?
Yeah,
So that like, you're getting that interest, and that's the beginning of the interest right there. Um, so yeah, it's up across from what I'm seeing. All the folks I work with, and we're summits in a lot of states at this point, and we're getting all the same reports. Everybody's leads are up, their activities up, and yeah, the like I said, spring's here. Things are heating up everywhere.
yeah, yeah. And I'm seeing multiple offers. We haven't seen those for a while, but uh, that's happening already. So, can that be a one-off here and there depending on the property? Yeah, I mean, if it's a super desirable property at a great price, sure. But
Yeah.
this was the first weekend on market for a 1968 home that was a time capsule,
Yeah.
and they got multiple offers. So I'm just sharing, definitely, a consideration.
Yeah, it is, and I think that's the when you talk about seller concessions and things like that, and shifting back to a strong seller's market, those are the first steps that we see, right? Like that, as you start to see multiple offers. I had one over I had one over the weekend as well that they had multiple offers on,
Yeah.
and it was out of the valley. It was in Council, right? So a couple
Oh,
hours away.
wow.
Yeah. So it's a real thing. It's something that we're going to have to watch, and it's when you talk about like that last point that you have on the screen there, it's timely. Like whether that time means seasonal, whether that means your financial status, whether that means interest rates, whether it means inventory, right? Like inventory right now is going to be a big driver. We don't we're still pretty low on inventory
Right.
across the nation, but in the states where they're that are still highly desirable, um, like Idaho, Tennessee, some of those, some where you're seeing a lot of that migration to, um, it's not a problem that's going to get solved quick. And as the market heats up and more people are out there shopping, it's just going to drive those prices up. That's what's going to drive our appreciation and our pricing increases.
Yeah, yeah, and there is a something to be said for on the it's timely in regards to in our spring summer that the it seems like there's definitely a time when inventory starts to come on, right? Sellers are going, hey, I got to sell my house to get into this new area. Um, so that I can get the kids ready for school. Seems like inventory comes up and then demand has a slight delay, at least in a lot of years, not all years. So you get the opportunity to look around, see some homes without feeling, a sense of urgency on it. But once that demand picks up, so my point is, if you look at the 30,000 foot view, um, it, even though we're talking about kind of what's happening now, we factor in all of this all of the time. If you come to
Right.
us in 6 months from now, we're reevaluating what's going on. What are we seeing with rates? What are we seeing with inventory? What are we seeing with our local market? What's your personal situation? And all the other factors, and putting it all together. I'm just
Right.
sharing evidence of what we talked about last year, translating into what we theorized would happen, and that these kind of rules or things that we consider, right? Supply demand ratio, that's a thing, that's always a thing, it's
Mhm.
always a consideration. And then the timeliness of our market, of course, doing this all day every day, we should know our market pretty well. What are our referral partners saying about their business? Is it heating up? Is it slowing down? Is there concern in the market? Is there confidence in the market? Like, we're what, the finger on the pulse type thing.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know that's all important.
It's very important. It's very important. And they're big factors into, you know, for me, it's more of those fence sitting, right? Like, is it now the time or not, right? Like we can give them these factors to help educate them and make them feel more comfortable. But I always fall back to the best time to buy real estate is now, right? The best time to buy real estate is yesterday. The next best time is today, right? Because it's especially when you're talking about a primary, or you're paying rent, um, and making someone else's mortgage, and financially does absolutely nothing for you.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that's a biggie. I have a client said she's never had a significant rent raise, and I'm like, wow, you're blessed. Because we've heard stories of this all the time. um,
Yeah,
i've I have clients that are closing here at the beginning of next month. This is the most extreme version that I've heard, but their rent was going to double
yeah.
from 1,400 a month to 2,800 a month.
Holy cow.
I don't, there must have been some nuances to that or something. And maybe it was because they weren't going to sign a whole year lease and they were going to do month to month. And they're just, but my point is, most people can't stomach a couple $100 increase.
Let alone 3, 4, 500, which we've seen a lot
Yeah.
over the past couple of years. And I do think that they're getting the inventory for rentals and stuff like that is they've definitely brought a lot more online, so it's driven rent prices down a little bit. But either way, it doesn't matter how you chop it up, right? Like, um, it, you can either afford to buy a home or you can't. And if you can afford to buy a home, especially today, a lot of the rentals are similar to a price what you're going to pay in a home.
Yeah.
But if the home is a little bit more, it's still a better return. You get zero return on rent.
Right. Right.
That there is no, the only thing that appreciates is your cost. You get nothing back from it. So if you're close to being able to buy a home or similar in rent versus house payment,
Mm-hmm.
it's a no-brainer because there's a return there. Your home's going to appreciate. The money that you put into it is going to, that's a savings account for you that eventually you'll be able to cash out when you sell.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, from a financial position, there's just no better way, no better thing to do.
Yeah, and in our market, I don't think there's anybody that would argue the fact that we are expecting considerable growth in the next, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, uh,
Yep.
it's just there's no reason that I could think of that we wouldn't continue the pace that we've seen for quite some time. So that just means home values, right,
Yeah.
go up, and that means if you're in the market, great, you're getting equity, and you're able to maybe grow that equity or parlay it into another property, um, or sit tight and let it gain in value. But if you're not in the market, that means it gets tougher and tougher and tougher. Everybody, to your point earlier, everybody wished they got into the market 10 years ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I can't remember. I don't know the numbers for our valley, but I know nationwide, you're 40+% of home buyers right now are investors, right? And that's just another good indicator. If they think it's a good time to buy, then it's a good time to buy,
Yeah.
right?
They're
And
crunching
so,
numbers, making sure it financially makes sense.
yep.
Yeah. Or they'd be in a
So
different market.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's just one of those things. Like, again, as much as I'd like to say everybody needs to buy a house right now, sometimes it's just not for some people, or they aren't ready yet. But let's find out.
Right.
It's worth your while to check it out and see where you're at and see if maybe it's time for you to start building some wealth.
Yeah. It's better to find out that you're not ready than to assume you're not and realize later that you could have been. You
Right.
were or you could have been. At
Right.
least then you would know, right? And that's a quick conversation with somebody like yourself. And, again, no obligation. Just, hey, we're here to help if it makes sense.
And I have these conversations all the time. In fact, I have a gal I'm working with now that was referred to me, and she's got some credit problems, and we're working through that. And I mean, she was surprised. I think it's going to cost her $5,000 to get to where her credit is, or get her score up, right, through multiple accounts and getting things paid down. And she was surprised at how little it was. And
Hmm.
that's then for me, that was like, it was a conversation, was like, I felt like that was a lot of money, right? Because it is a considerable sum of money. But she's
Yeah.
like, man, I could probably do that in 6 months. Okay, then.
There
Well,
you
let's
go.
go. And I'm here for I'm here for the trip with you. So
Yeah.
let's get to it.
Yeah. That's
So,
awesome.
mhm.
That's awesome. Well, I think we're pretty reasonable in our time today. We're at 40 minutes, so gone over a little bit, but that's okay. That's to be expected. But hopefully, the viewers, listeners have gotten a lot out of this conversation. And the biggies are, as we just stated, let's ask the question, see where you're at. Um, Please know that we have your best interest in mind. We're not going to, apply any pressure or make you feel like you're rushed to do anything, because that's just not where our heart and our minds are at. We want to see the best for you as it relates to the real estate industry, which we happen to be blessed to operate our businesses in. So if you honor us with the opportunity, we seriously appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, I think with that, we'll sign off.
Okay, my friend.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us
Talking
today,
to you
Chase.
today. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody have a blessed one. Take care.